Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know how I can live up to Rihanna, though. So hopefully I don't let all of you down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my history of machine learning, what I've learned, what I've experienced. We'll go through a lot. But I also want to thank the organizers. It's probably the most fun event that I've spoken at. I also am very, very happy that they started at 1 p.m. Usually these things start really early. I had one in Vegas that started at 9 a.m. and that was not fun. So I'm from Brazil originally. Started programming in BASIC, that's me. 8 years old back in Brazil. My dad had the insight of putting me in programming classes back then, and it's worked out pretty well. Did computer engineering at Maryland. We'll talk through in depth about that. Worked at IBM in the IT space, Microsoft for a while, Workpop, and then Reddit, and then now Novi Finance. But most important on this slide, I want everyone here to understand that dogs are better than cats. Because dogs are amazing. Like, good. I was wondering, I was surprised there were no cat fans in the audience because the internet is mostly cat pictures, so I figured you guys would like cats as well. So I started out at Maryland. I took a neural networks course. It was actually pretty funny because I sat down in this class, didn't understand any of it. It was essentially this academic exercise. It made me feel really smart, except that I didn't understand any of it. But at the end of the semester, you couldn't classify a trash can with more than 40% accuracy. So back in 2004, ML was really not at its heydays. It was kind of cool, but you wouldn't really use it for anything. Fast forward, good 7 years later, I was at Microsoft and started actually hearing about some of the changes and evolutions that we had there and try to use it for the first time on some of our technologies. So one of the teams that I ran there was the data platform team. That team was in charge of all of the data coming back from the billion-plus Office customers, and one of the features we launched was the ability for people to send feedback and just have a verbatim blurb of what they were thinking or what they thought about the product, how they liked using Office, or feedback on it. Can't read feedback from a billion-plus customers. So we started doing sentiment analysis to figure out, okay, what are people happy about, what are they not happy about, and then how do we go and improve the things that they are unhappy about. And then we started doing some phrase structure analysis in early NLP to essentially aggregate all of that data and build charts like this, where you'd have a tree map of the size of the square is how much feedback we're getting, the color between green and red is whether it's positive or negative, and then our customer support teams and everyone can just focus in on the negative things, right? Because you want to go and try to make it better. You don't want to just read about all the good things that you're doing. So that was fun, some simple visualizations. Not really production at that stage because we're doing it mostly for internal purposes. Then I went over to Workpop, which was a startup down in Los Angeles, and we did ML for the first time on features. So we build ranking systems for applications to jobs. So you get a bunch of applications to particular jobs, and we've got to figure out how do we rank them and get you the best applications, right? How do we get the best candidate for that job to be at the top? So did that for a while, built out models around optimizing bids. I don't know if any of you have worked in the jobs marketplace, very similar to ad tech, where you have to go and take these ad inventories and then push them out to a bunch of different sites. Figuring out how much money to pay to bid for each one of the ads and which sites to go to and what time is actually pretty hard, so we built models around that. And a little chatbot to help people figure out how to find jobs and how to get their next role. So this is all fun stuff. Kind of got my juices flowing again. And then at Workpop, I was like, okay, I want to go actually build a data and AI company. I want to do this for real. So I left Workpop to go do that, but got a little bit sidetracked. So moved into San Francisco. One of the partners in Andreessen reached out. I was like, hey, you want to do something in data AI, at least talk to Reddit, right? They have a ridiculous amount of data. They're not really using it today. We had 2 data engineers at the time, and there's a lot of really cool stuff you could build there. Originally, didn't feel like that was the right fit. I wanted to start my company. Steve and Alexis were great, convinced me to join, and that's what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on today. If you haven't heard about Reddit, I'm glad it was one of the words that you did know about. It's the 5th largest website in the US, I think the 8th largest in the world. This actually goes up and down between 3rd and 5th, just depends on what month you're looking at. Tons of content, over 350 million active users, million plus communities, 10 million plus posts, and a lot of activity and content getting generated every day. So what do we do with all that power? Well, for the cat fans in the audience, you might appreciate this. There are a lot of cat gifs. You got a cat fist bumping his owner that has 130,000 plus points. You've got a cat walking his human, 23,000 plus points, right? So this is just fun content that people are going and putting out there and enjoying. But it's not just cat pictures, which is why I was okay working there for so long. We also have really cool things, like on the bottom, our assistance is one of my favorite subreddits, is people just ask for help. They generally need something. They're trying to get assistance with something. This woman found her kidney donor on Reddit, which is pretty exciting, right? Our Confessions, another one that I'm a fan of. This person posted that they cut off all content with everyone, faked their death, moved to Kenya, and essentially started a new life. And we may have found Tupac. You also got this one. If you're in the dating scene trying to look for your future partner, this is one strategy that worked out. I don't know that I recommend it, but this person used to cat sit someone else's cat and read their diary and used what they learned to get that person to fall in love with them, and now they're married. So a lot of things happens on Reddit. So with all of that content, though, there's a lot of different things, right? They don't really have a lot of congruency with each other. There's a lot of different types of content. So how do we get to you what you want to read? Some people are there for cat pictures, some want dog pictures, some want to find tips on getting their future partner. So this is what Reddit started out as, 2006. So a long time ago, and we had this recommended tab, which was our first attempt at figuring out what do we want to show to users. We even had this little, the yellow tooltip that says that we learned based on you voting on links. We said that, we didn't quite do it back then, but we did try some things. We started out with collaborative filtering. So this is essentially a way to take every single user and boil them down to a vector, right? Like machines can deal with vectors, they can't really deal with like humans and people in text as easily. So we would take you, and we would take your upvotes and downvotes on content, and based on that, we create a vector that represents you. Theoretically, this vector will tell me what you like and what you dislike. Then we go and find other people that are somewhat close to you and see, I'm going to create a group of all these vectors that are somewhat similar to each other by measuring the distance between them. And in that group, I'm going to assume they all like similar things. So if one person likes something there, I'm going to push that content to the other people in that group and then do that ad nauseum, right? So it was cool. It actually kind of works. A couple of big challenges, though. It doesn't work at scale. It was an O(n) squared algorithm, so we just blew memory on the machines back then when we would do this. And not a lot of people vote. Only 10% of our user base would actually vote, and most people vote on one item a day. So there's just not that much content for us to go and build a model around. We started doing things like assigning buddies, like finding people that are highly engaged and vote on a lot of things, find someone that was somewhat similar to them that voted on few things and try to use them together. But in the end, it was just too hard for machines to do, and we figured it would be easier for a human to do it. There's a little physics joke there at the bottom, if you can see, but physics works really well if you take a lot of sleights of hands. Essentially, if you consider a cow a spherical object with radius r, then all of a sudden you can do a lot of physics around cows. Cows aren't really spherical objects. It's kind of what the assumption when you're trying to boil down humans to a vector, because we're not mathematical equations either. But it does work out really well for bots. So if you're thinking about how do you detect bots, how do you detect vote manipulation, it turns out that we still use very similar things today to detect things like that. So we said, okay, machines are too hard for machines to do. Let's figure out how to get the humans to do the hard part. Reddit back then was uncategorized content. It was just one big lump of everything you can find, cats, dogs, whatever it is. We built subreddits, and we said, okay, how do you go and categorize certain things? Let the community, let the users do it. This was a post, a little bit old now, but every single subreddit, the colors are relationships between them based on subscribers, and then we just went through and figured out topics, right? So you've got clusters around news, politics, you've got clusters around machines, images and GIFs, TV, movies, and sports. So this made it a little bit easier, because now I knew topic and content for those items, and at its core, Reddit is a relevancy engine, right? It's a front page of the internet. It's about you going to the internet and finding the stuff that you like. So we could do that on a broad basis, just based on user votes. We could see on average what do people like. ML is where it gets really easy, because then you can personalize that information to individual users. Not everyone likes the same things. I can't create a front page of the internet for every single human manually or based on votes, but I can go and build models to try and figure out that. So how do we go about this? And this is kind of a little bit of a step-by-step piece of how do you leverage machine learning in the enterprise. You build a team first. Started in 2017. There's about 100 people in the company, 70 engineers, 2 data engineers, 4 relevance engineers, which are really back-end engineers, no search team, no ML, no AI. We started growing out the team. So they hired me. I was a director. In turn, I hired a lot of smarter people to actually get shit done. Turns out that was really important, especially if you're looking at some point as a leader. You always want to be able to move on to your next thing and figure out how to leave things in a good state. Most important thing to do that is you hire the best team. And we started growing out the machine learning disciplines. This even goes down to figuring out the comp models, what do we pay them, how do we rank them, what do we actually, how do we look at what's important or not in that role. Step 1, you got to wrangle your data. So you can't really do any ML, you can't do any AI if your data isn't in a clean, concise state. And this is what we started out with. We had an Nginx pipeline with essentially just pixel logs. I had an idea of how many times people did different things, That's almost all that I did. I could filter it maybe by like what location they were in, but there wasn't much user segmentation I could do there. So we replaced this and built an entirely new data pipeline. The previous one had no schema, for example, so I could store whatever I wanted. Super flexible, devs love it. When you try to actually use the data, it's useless. So we created a schema data leveraging a lot of Google cloud infrastructure as well, but building into our existing pieces. So you have you have event collectors getting in all the events. We got to over 10 billion events a day. You would enrich them, figure out what kind of data you want to add, geolocation data, pass them through different rules, and then go in through Google Cloud to be able to actually train models and everything off of. And you got to keep it front and center. So you can build that pipeline. If you're not looking at your data every day, these are exact dashboards. If you're not looking at if execs aren't looking at data every day, very, very quickly it'll get deprioritized, the data will get dirty, and then it's useless for you to build any kind of machine learning models on. Step 2, experiment. So the other word on that, sorry about the formula that's on the way. This is a Jaccard similarity formula, and all that it's covering is saying, let's look at subreddits and figure out what the subreddits are similar to each other based on their subscribers. So if you take 2 different subreddits, they have a list of people that are subscribed to them. The ones that have the most overlap, we assume the most similarity, right? Because all the dog people subscribe to all the dog ones, all the cat people subscribe to all the cat ones. Worked out okay, another O(n)² algorithm, so it was really hard to actually build. We had to only do a whitelist of subreddits and do a very small subset of things there. We couldn't calculate similarities across all subreddits there. And we also had default subreddits for a period of time, which really screwed things up. Every single user that would come on, we'd put them on these 50 default subreddits, so they look super similar when they had nothing to do with each other. Then we got into NLP, yet another word. This is when we decided, okay, that was cool. Your cross-similarity is a good first step. Let's take a more complex next step and actually look at the words and the text in the subreddits, in the content, and figure out similarities that way. Similar to collaborative filtering, we would take a subreddit, run doc to vac, which essentially builds a vector out of all of the words in a post, and the document was just a bunch of posts in that subreddit. And then we can look at differences and similarities between those vectors. So this works really well. We built an internal tool that goes in and allows people to go and put in a subreddit and see all the similar subreddits next to it. We hired a Reddit cartographer. Her sole job is to go in and create a taxonomy and tag subreddits that are interesting for us to actually go and build around. And then you get things like, Indiana. If you put in r/Indiana, which is a subreddit about a state, you get a bunch of other states. Fighting Irish Football, which is a college football team in the US, and you get a bunch of other college football team subreddits. So it works quite well. And we're starting to leverage this for onboarding and for getting people to see the content that we know they're going to like. Then we took the bigger step, right? Reddit is the front page of the internet. So the most important thing, kind of our crown jewels, is the home feed. We went through and replaced our home feed algorithm with a machine learning algorithm. I love this tweet by Francois Cholet. He says this is modern machine learning, right? So this is that common meme of like, you get smarter and smarter as you go down the list. We skipped deep learning, so I'm glad to say that, but we went into logistic regression next. At some point, I hope to work my way down to hash tables. And if you haven't worked in ML, hash tables is basically a very simple, it's not even ML, but it's just telling you, you don't have to go super complex. You can start easy and work your way up. So we built an algorithm that is training on about 10 terabytes of data, 50 million plus features, and 5 million plus parameters to decide, based on any content and based on your interactivity with that content, what do we want to actually show you. Reddit rabbit hole, I'll go real quick by this one. So we took that same vector approach and just said, okay, if I have one content, so we have similar subreddits, can I find similar content? So if I have a post that I know you really, really like, can I show you other posts like it? So that's what this was doing. We started out super simple. It wasn't even ML, really. We took keywords out of that post and then took those words and used our search tech that we also rebuilt earlier in the year to bring back results. So if you had a post about a dog flying or jumping over a fence, we would say, okay, dog fence are keywords, and then we would search and return results that have to do with dogs and fences. But then we started building NLP on that as well. So instead of just a simple system just to test out the pipeline, let's go and create vectors of the content and then look at similarities between those. And we started doing in what we call them snooze days, essentially our hackathon, a model to look at an image and find similar images. So if all someone did was post a picture of a cat, we can find other cats on there as well. Step 3, we don't know yet, but step 4 is profit. So this is when, right, we've done all this. We didn't do it to be smart. We didn't do it to look smart. I didn't do it to come out here and talk about it, although it's been pretty awesome, thank you. We did it because you want to actually quantify results, right? Which is why you don't go to deep learning right away if you haven't started yet. Like, we're doing it to show some kind of positive lift on user experience. This is a bunch of our actual experimental results. So the time spent on Reddit is one of the most important things that we look at. Two key things. How much time are people spending on it? And what's our retention, right? So are we boring people, or are they moving off too quickly because we give them too much sugary content and not enough fiber? You can see on the control, kind of see the green line. That means that people are spending more time on these personalized rankings that we've given. The orange versus blue bars, that's telling you unsubreddit recommendations. Orange means people are subscribing more to things. The orange was the recommendations based on our model. Blue was a random whitelist recommendation. The only places where blue is higher is the actual close the control or don't recommend me this anymore. So clearly the model has actually panned out quite better than a whitelisted recommendation set. A few other things, more time on site. You can see kind of the trend here. The green box is when we were experimenting with a bunch of things, and then you see that time spent on Reddit going up afterwards, after all these iterations. And the bottom right one is key as well. That's retention. So it's very, very easy for you to optimize for a particular metric and at the expense of others. So if I just say, for example, clicks, if all I care about is predicting clicks on a content, I'm going to create a fantastic clickbait website. It'll be a bunch of links that look really clickable. People click on them. They may or may not be useful. So then you start looking at things like dwell time. How much time do they spend on that content, right? Because then I know that people are clicking on the content, enjoying it, and then coming back later versus immediately bouncing back. Retention is a great way to reflect that, because you know that you're not just optimizing people and then trying to get too much information out of them or trying to get them bored of content, and then they eventually leave your site. So, what's next? This is literally the entire slide about what's next, because it's very, very early on. But what I've always wanted to do, I've always had a passion for finances, right? I've always had a passion for fintech. And when I left, and I was thinking about what can I do, what can I leverage with what I've learned in the data and AI space that's going to help other people and help make the world a better place, is the Silicon Valley meme there. And one of the things I think about is finance a lot, right? There's a huge amount of information asymmetry in finance. We've got people that are advisors, and all they do is try to sell you their own financial products. So if I go, Fidelity is a big financial company. If I go to a Fidelity financial advisor, they're not going to tell me what's the best thing for me to do. They want to sell me Fidelity products. So tell me what's best for me in the context of the products they're trying to sell. So what we're actually looking at building here is leveraging all of that data, leveraging your financial data that you share with us, and seeing how can I build a good financial plan for you? How can I decide, based on your unique needs, like that's the personalization piece, what is best for you to do? Should you pay off your credit cards right now? Which credit cards do you pay off first? Is it student loans? Do you save cash for an emergency fund? Or should you be investing in retirement or investing in stock? So those are pretty complex questions. They change a lot based on your personal situation. So that's what we're trying to build here at Novi. That's all within a minute, so I'm glad to keep everybody on time here. I was going to get in trouble if I didn't. But thank you all. My LinkedIn info is here, Twitter. Feel free to talk to me. Happy to answer any questions through the media. But thank you.